Did Prince Harry win in the court of public opinion during his first day at trial? Or did he lose? Hello everyone, welcome to Royal News Network. My name is Brittany and today we are talking about Prince Harry's first day on the stand. He was there as basically the sole and key witness to give compelling, factually based testimony about phone hacking scandal that happened 20 plus years ago now, for the most part, and how this has deeply influenced him. And it's been so triggering and it's been so hurtful to him over the years, and hurtful in his other relationships, and he's dealt with paranoia and all these sorts of things that he's bringing to court. However, when you get Harry on the stand and you try to deal with the actual facts of the case, you get mostly, that's suspicious, it's similar to something else, and I don't know. And I think it's become incredibly apparent that this case has nothing to do with changing the media landscape as Harry claims. This is not going to change anything. This is not going to help anyone, except for perhaps Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, because the sole drive of this is truly a vendetta against a single person. And why they don't bring charges against this person, I'm not exactly sure. If you're suing the paper, shouldn't you be suing this guy too? So I'll get into who I think this is, because I think that's very, very key here, is that everything is driving towards this outcome that really is completely separate from the trial at hand. So we'll go into the details. I'll share some of Harry's rather innocuous statements, like fun things like it's too private to share about his broken arm, but he can share it to us about his frostbitten penis. Yes. So the definitions of privacy here are a little odd. So we will go into all this today, but if you guys haven't been here to Royal News Network before, like I said, my name is Brittany, and on this channel I provide compelling, real commentary about the latest news and sometimes a little bit of gossip as well. In addition, I will be reviewing television shows and movies and sharing a bit about history. So if you want to subscribe to this channel, I would absolutely love to have you back. And in addition, I also have an upcoming trip to Germany and Austria. If you're interested in that, there will be a link down below. We have confirmed the trip, so we are definitely going. But if you want to sign up, if you want to be part of this amazing experience, again, there will be a link down below. It'll just be a fun chance to hang out with other people who love the royals, love history, love Europe, and just love a time to have good food and great friendships and conversations. That's what's happens on these trips, or at least the first one, that was what happened, and it was absolutely lovely. So again, guys, I'd love to have you tag along. In addition, I also have a weekly newsletter, Royal Wire, which I will work on after this, and I also have a fashion channel, which is, I need to do another video for that as well, but that is done insanely well. Last couple days, 2.6 million views. I cannot believe it. I haven't had a video yet to get to 1 million, and have one get to 2.6 or 2.7, wherever it is now, just seems absolutely crazy to me. So that channel is dynamic, and so that is super exciting. I did the video on the Jordanian royal wedding, which was absolutely beautiful and lovely, and so I'm hoping to do a video that discusses all the tiaras related to it as well, because I covered them briefly but not in their entirety. And before we go into Harry's case, we also have Catherine, the Princess of Wales. She was at the Windsor Family Hub today, meeting parents and children and really talking about the importance of family. And so she was there doing that, looking absolutely fabulous. And I thought it was a very clever move by the palace to clearly try to put Catherine and have her at least somewhat compete for Harry for the front pages. I think that's really good. So perhaps her image on some of those will be on the front pages, whereas Harry and his gigantic childish temper tantrum will be shuffled to the back pages. And then we also have It's Swedish National Day. Now, I was planning on going to Sweden this year and participating in that, although now that Harry's court case was at the same time, I may have stayed for that. Anyways, but Swedish National Day occurred, and so interesting to note, because we will get into this in Harry's testimony, that who attended was Princess Madeline and her family. They currently live in Florida, though they'll be moving back to Sweden later this year, and her daughter actually broke her arm in a recent accident and had to have surgery. The just happened several weeks ago. And so she was pictured with her daughter at the event. And just what I find is super interesting is that Harry in his court case talks about how it was, they don't release private information. And, a broken thumb, that's too private. But actually, we've had several royals announce the injuries to their children just to let people know what's going on and perhaps, maybe pray for them, think about them, send them good wishes. But of course, no, Harry just wants to talk about his frozen penis. So anyways, guys, it looked like there were some fantastic celebrations in Sweden. And I'm looking forward to being there for the Swedish Golden Jubilee of King Carl Gustaf. That'll be later this year in September, right after the Germany-Austria trip. So yes, I will fly into Munich and then I will end up in Stockholm and then I'll go to the UK, maybe go to Copenhagen because I think it's kind of close and I'd love to hit another country, and then go to the UK to see the coronation exhibit. I already bought my tickets, and then maybe one more place. I don't know. I'm mostly thinking of going to additional place just because I can catch the direct flight back to where I live. I think that would be nice and it would just be fun. So guys, again, looking forward to sharing some of my travel adventures. Somebody mentioned they would love it if I did a travel like Instagram or something, and I actually started doing that initially at some point when I was creating my channel. So if you guys are ever interested in that, me restarting that, let me know and I'll try to get something together that's rather interesting. So we shall see. Oh, goodness gracious, but back to Harry. Oh my gosh, this poor man-child, my goodness, he needs a lot of therapy. For a guy who claims he is in a lot of therapy, he really needs to put down the hallucinogenics and go to a place that actually makes him stand account for things. Because you get the sense all the time that Harry is just railing against everyone. Everyone's bad, everyone's awful, he hates everyone. But the problem is, throughout all this, is that Prince Harry is at the center of most of this. He blames the media, he blames his family, he blames pretty much everybody around the sun, except for taking any responsibility for himself. So when you listen to some of his testimony, especially if you are familiar with royals and those sorts of things, you just think to yourself, are you really complaining about that? Because number one to think about, and this is just very, very broad to lay out this statement just entirely. I actually have, I believe it's 3 or 4 main points to go over, some examples, and then ending where I truly think Harry's vendetta lies. But when it comes to this broad statement, all these articles that he's bringing up, some of them are so innocuously dumb that who flipping cares? Who cares about what the media said 20 years ago? Do any of us remember this? No. Do anybody of us care? No. And the big thing is, none of this is happening anymore. Harry is railing against the illegal phone hacking that did happen. It's not happening anymore. So what's the point of this stupid trial? What's the point? What's the point? How are you going to change something that's already been changed, that they already acknowledged that they did this? The Mirror has even acknowledged that yes, there was at least one story, at least one, not the 144 whatever he brought into trial and tried to get on the record, just one that may have used some illegal phone taps. That's it. That is all that's there. And he brings in these stories where the details is like, well, somebody shared that I wasn't happy in the Outback, or I was frustrated with the media in the Outback. And it's like, how dare they report that? And another funny one, which I was like, seriously? Is that somebody said, well, Harry was upset about the divorce of his parents. And he's like, well, how could they know that? Well, Harry, they're human beings with a brain. And so you can make some logical inferences based on the situation and people you see. That is what I do sometimes. I like to say reportedly when it's a report of something, but you can read details into body language, what they're not saying, what they are saying. Analytical people and people who are just have good observational skills, which I consider myself to be, it's like I can make accurate guesstimates based on what I'm seeing, because number one, I'm not an idiot. Now, am I going on saying that Harry and Meghan right now, they're in the divorce proceedings? No, but can I imply based on some of the reports they're getting that their marriage doesn't seem to be in a really good place? Yeah, I think I can. And that is not to say that perhaps I could be wrong. I could 100% be wrong. There's always a possibility that I am wrong in any of these videos. You can always do your own research, make your own conclusions. I encourage that. But I also know for sure, for 100% for certain that sometimes you can just make an estimate about what people are feeling. Like when a child's going through a divorce, I would assume you are upset. Are you not upset that your parents are going through a divorce, Harry? I'm not stupid. I can probably imply that that's probably the case for you. Apparently that is too hard for me or any of the other media outlets to do. Like, we can only suss that out. That's difficult for a child in divorce if we illegally try to obtain that information. We can't observe that or make the logical conclusion there. And I think that's something really, really key here, is that Harry is pulling in these examples, and Harry is making these just unbelievably broad accusations that don't have that much basis in reality. And that's what we'll get to first, is that his accusations, as you listen to them. So again, most of them, the details of these stories are innocuous, and who cares? That's a big thing. Nobody cares about what Harry's railing against, really. The stories, the details of the stories he's upset about are just so inconsequential and so in the past that you would have to remind me, like some of the stories, I was like, oh yeah, I vaguely recall that from the time I was still in high school when a lot of this occurred, or even in middle school. So I'm like, I can't maybe sort of remember this. Who does? So who cares this much? But Harry is very much into looking into the past. That's what Camilla Tommely alleged in a recent video, and I think she's exactly right. Harry is obsessed with his past because he's thinking if he can fix the past, somehow he saves his mother. It's not logical, it's not reasoned, it's not sound, but I think that's somewhat what he believes. And one of the first things to go over here is that when it comes to everything Harry said in this trial so far, it's been vague and broad. His accusations are just wild, and he has no real basis for them. He just throws them out there. And especially there was one point, I think it may be in a different point I have, when Andrew Green, the lawyer for the Mirror, challenges him on it. He's like, well, I don't know. He's like, it's not my job to do this and to deconstruct my own argument. And Andrew's like, well, yeah, it is. You're the one bringing the lawsuit. So here, let's go into some of these details here about how these accusations were so incredibly vague and broad. You can't even think of them as giving an actual reasoned response to them, because the reasoned response doesn't really even exist, and you can't make any inferences or conclusions based on what he's saying. So here's one. Harry said he can't remember reading article when it was published. Mr. Green asks, are we not in the realms of total speculation? So this was regarding the broken thumb story, in that Harry claims someone's phone was hacked to get the story. And Harry goes, I'm not the one who wrote the article. You'd have to ask the journalist. He says he can't remember reading the article at the time, but adds, there were certain people that read the BBC, the Mirror, the Mail, and just because a story has originated somewhere else doesn't mean that the people around me haven't read the information. Everybody would have known that I broke my thumb at that point, but I don't believe that any newspaper had the right to talk about it. In response to a question about the palace's spokesman's comments about his injury, he insists it would have been made in response to journalists. Okay, Harry, it's not that bad that somebody's interested in your injury. And people would see it and they would have questions, and so better to actually answer the question than to have this endless speculation that starts to go way off the rails. This is what happened with your son, Archie. You know why? You guys were idiots when it came to announcing the birth and everything, and because of that, it has given immense fuel and fire to the surrogacy rumors. And you know who is at the basis of that? Why, it's you. It's you. You did that. You guys did that by purposefully lying and trying to mislead the public by telling people Meghan was in labor after she had already given birth. So what do organizations like the Palace do sometimes? Well, they tell you, hey, somebody broke their arm, somebody broke their leg, they had an injury, they had an illness. Now, in some instances regarding COVID, there was a time period, especially in the early days, where actually William and Charles had COVID at the same time. And they did keep this secret from the public for a period. So they did announce Charles had it, but not that William had it. And they did this to avoid concern and speculation about what would happen if both of them died or anything like that. And you have to remember, at the time, there was a lot of heightened tension around what was going on. So I understand from a standpoint of avoiding chaos, perhaps grave concern with the public, keeping that information about William's illness private, especially because William was more likely to actually recover than Charles. But a broken thumb is not like everybody was like dissecting it, but they noticed you broke your thumb. So they would want to know that you broke your thumb. It's not that hard to imagine why they would release that. And you also have to think too, when it came to Princess Leonor of Sweden, like I said, they had made an official announcement that she had broken her arm and needed surgery, and that's why her mother Madeline couldn't make it to an event in Sweden. And then you also had Princess Alexis of the Netherlands. She had a skiing accident that required surgery on her leg, and so they made an announcement about it. Now in this other case, I'm not sure exactly where they did, but when it came to Infanta Sofia of Spain, it was reported through Hola, although I don't know if it was an official palace statement, that she had slipped and fallen somehow in their vacation home, and so she had to have some stitches taken care of. She was a little stiff, and so she had to walk with a brace. And you know why they shared that information? Because she was walking around with a brace and nobody knew why. And it's important to give some details to people. Otherwise, endless speculation occurs. This is the catalyst, the huge problem with Harry and Meghan and everything they do, is they just allow speculation and other things to fester. And then they get mad at people for questioning the validity of their children. I'm like, well, you only have yourselves to blame there. I'm sorry. There's nobody else to blame about the questions about Archie and Lily but you guys. You guys are the ones who have been weird about it, who have been trying to hide and do all the subterfuge, and it should not be a surprise to you that inability to be transparent publicly has resulted in headlines and stories that you probably don't like. And again, some truthfulness here would go a long way. And the other thing that you see here is that Harry is applying what happened in one case or a handful of cases to everything the Daily Mirror has ever done. So everything, all the stories in the Daily Mirror regarding Harry were all the result of unlawful phone hacking, at least in the early 2000s. So this is what he says, or this is what we get from the Daily Telegraph. Asked by Mr. Green if he was aware that the Mirror Group denies the unlawful gathering of information, the Duke says he is, but insists that it is impossible to believe. Well, it's also impossible to believe that you graduated high school and that you are not as dim as you appear to be, but hey, we're here. He tells the court that's impossible to believe given the level of interest at myself, the time, as well as how desperate journalists were for something royal. Mirror Group has admitted to elements of phone hacking already, I believe, and the competition between newsrooms means there's going to be a desperate need to find out anything about our private lives. Mr. Green then shows the Duke a Daily Mirror article from July 15th, 2000. So yes, this is 23 freaking years ago. 23 years ago. 2 days before the Daily Mirror article he is complaining about that revealed the princesses were not going to be present at the Queen Mother's Gala. So again, Harry is telling the Mirror, well, you got all this information that you couldn't have gotten anywhere else. And several times they showed him, hey, this story was covered in an entirely different publication a day or two before we covered it. So what are you talking about? And Harry doesn't have a good answer to that, because to him, it's impossible to believe that you got this information anywhere else other than your competitors. So again, lots of questions here. It also says the Duke has insisted Mirror journalists could have still obtained information from phone hacking, even in the case when some of the information was public domain in previous articles from other publications. Based on my understanding and what I know, just because there was a story previously doesn't stop journalists from attempting to take it further, Prince Harry says. Mr. Green asked whether this doesn't strike the Duke as a little unfair. Well, Harry's too stupid to answer that question, because it is unfair, because obviously it's completely evident that sometimes articles are in different places. I go off of pretty much everything I talk about is based on what's been reported myself. Now, hopefully one day I'll develop my own sources, but right now I don't. So I report on what other people have reported. And that's somewhat journalism. Now, if you get something extra, it could be from a source, it could be from knowing a history about a certain situation. There's a lot of things here that Harry doesn't factor in part because I don't think he probably understands it. So he also says Mr. Green cross-examined the Duke on the second article, and Harry claimed that the evidence of invoices to third parties such as private investigators has been destroyed. So apparently there was evidence of somebody getting into his life, but it's all been destroyed now. It doesn't exist. Knowing what I know and in my experience, the vast majority of stories that appeared were the result of some form of unlawful activity, even if they appeared in other newspapers beforehand. So if another source, another newspaper got information through unlawful means, it's the Daily Mirror's fault. Just so we're clear here, that everything that happened is the Daily Mirror's fault. The logic doesn't track. It doesn't track. It's broad, it's vague, it has no basis, no tenuous grasp on reality. In the case of the 1996 Daily Mirror article, wow, we're stretching there. We're getting close, 27 years, guys. That article is 27 years old that he's complaining about. Mr. Green pushes that the Duke has no evidence of invoices related to it. I think there's a lot of evidence was destroyed, adding he finds the timing of the invoices incredibly suspicious. Well, yeah, they probably destroyed the invoices, Harry. It was 27 years ago. I'm just going through some of the stuff I moved into my new place, and I'm tearing some things up because I'm like, you know what, it's been so long ago, do I really need to keep this anymore? That's what they probably did. They just cleaned house. Like, there's nothing nefarious here. Even if there was something nefarious and they perhaps kept it for a bit, number one, they want to keep it forever. And number two, why would you keep something on the record for 27 years? Usually invoices and stuff, I'm sure they purge them after 10, 15, 20, maybe if you're pushing it, but there's no reason at this point for them to keep invoices that are so old. There's just not. So again, Harry's argument here makes no sense. But then when he says Mr. Green asks him whether the press association story revealing the same information was an issue to him. So there's another story where the press association were given the material and printed it, and Harry again is upset for the Daily Mirror because they somehow were nefarious in how they got information from the press association. To which he responded that there's no history of phone hacking to obtain stories at PA. Are you suggesting that just because the Mirror has admitted one incident of phone hacking, that every other article was attained by phone hacking? That's huge. Just because it happened one time does not mean every other single time has that. And Harry's accusations are so broad, so vague, and so unsubstantiated because he's using one example and labeling everything else that he doesn't like that. And that's not how this works. He needs to have actual evidence here, of which he does not have. And the suspicions and similarities, like, oh my gosh, that goes on and on. This is a good one because it has both words in it, both keywords here. So this is regarding a trip Harry made with Chelsea Davy and where their travel plans were revealed. So Mr. Green tells the court that an article in the Daily Star published many months before the People one revealed that Harry was spending hours on the phone to Chelsea. The lawyer said this reveals extensive information about the phone calls between the couple. Yes, it does say that, the Duke admits. The quotes that are attributed to an insider are what remain suspicious to me. But later admitted he could see similarities between a Daily Mail article and the People story, which was published afterwards. The level of intrusion and interest around our relationship. One quotes a passenger on a plane saying that Chelsea said she can't wait to see me. I don't think my girlfriend would have spoken to a passenger on a plane about our relationship, he told the court. Well, how do you know that, Harry? Probably she doesn't even remember, it was so long ago, but does she maybe tell a person who perhaps doesn't know her that yeah, or she thinks doesn't know who she is, hey, yeah, I'm going up to the UK, I'm really excited to see my boyfriend. That's not outside the realm of possibility, or they could just be making it up. Like, does that not ever occur to this guy? He really is very dense. He's not a smart guy. But his lawyers are certainly raking it in. They're the only ones winning in this scenario because they can put him on, they can just placate him, put him on trial, and they get paid either way. Another article, Duke is told he is the source of his own complaint. Not only are his accusations broad and vague, but he also is complaining about his own comments. So he said, before moving on to the 10th article in the claim, Mr. Green hammers home the point that Harry had revealed his birthday plans and other private information in an embargoed press association interview. The position then is this: the private information of which you complain in the Daily Mirror article had been revealed by you and then published in other newspapers. Mr. Green tells the court, I see the similarities, of course, Harry responds before adding that he believes the article was connected to an invoice and that the timing was suspicious. That was Harry's word of the day, suspicious. Suspicious is not an accusation. Tell any of us what makes you think it's suspicious besides the fact that there could be a non-existent invoice that was probably destroyed 15 years ago because it was no longer relevant. us what the information is. Like, this is so dumb on his part. I just don't understand the level of dumb here. It's quite astounding. But then the most exciting thing is Harry's version of a smoking gun. This is hilarious. I really do think this is hilarious. It says, media lawyer Jonathan Code, who is from the Sky News, that's who they pulled it from, has been listening into proceedings and says, we have just heard the strongest piece of evidence yet from the Duke of Sussex. He says the Mirror barrister was talking about a Mirror article which dealt with Harry's holiday in Mozambique with Chelsea Davy. The Mirror's lawyer, Andrew Green Casey, asked Harry in court, what did the prince think had been illegally obtained? Mr. Code says, Prince Harry said, it's the flight details. He said there's no way anyone would have released the details because it created a major security issue. And he's firm. He said there was no one who would have known the flight details. It would be a closely guarded secret because his security was at risk. You could see that the Mirror Casey knew Harry had struck back at that point. He did not look happy. Now, if the Mirror lawyer had been as close a royal watcher as perhaps I was, I would have immediately gone back to him and go, okay, Harry, so you're saying that the only way anybody can know details about a royal's flight arrangements is if their phone had been illegally hacked. So explain to me how in 2021 we got pictures of the Wales' family, then the Cambridge family, on their way to Jordan. Now these pictures had been scrubbed. They were taken, you could tell by long range at Heathrow at a special terminal, but this was right before the family went to Jordan, and the pictures were up and then they were taken down. And they did say, I believe, that they were at the airport and flying out, but they had taken the pictures away. Now I don't know what details were in the pictures, but obviously there were concerns about their security going to Jordan. And we've had other flight details of royals revealed. So Harry, you're telling us that the only way any of this could occur is if phone hacking was involved. Well, then the Wales' situation couldn't happen. And numerous other situations that have happened in the last several years could never have happened because it would have been impossible for anybody to know the security details because everything is so tight. But the thing is that people leak. Somebody tells the wrong person. Another person shares a detail that they shouldn't have. People make logical conclusions. An errant paper was left out. Somebody saw them on the plane. There's a myriad of reasons why the flight and the security could have been compromised. It doesn't just have to deal with phone hacking. And so to call this a smoking gun, I think is ludicrous on the part of this lawyer. And I think it's a clear indication that Harry's case rests on the broad and vague accusations that basically everything regarding the Daily Mirror was somehow taken in a phone hacking scandal. But that just doesn't hold water. The argument does not hold any water. And so the next thing we're going to talk about is Harry's definition of privacy, because he has a different one, I think, than pretty much everybody else on the face of the planet. So these are a couple things that Harry was upset about. So one was the kissing disease article. So Andrew Green jumped straight back into cross-examining. So this was after lunch. This was the 8th article titled Harry's Sick with Kissing Disease from March 2002. So that is, again, 21 years ago now. The Daily Mirror article is about Prince Harry's diagnosis with glandular fever, which is mono. Mr. Green points out that St. James's Palace spokeswoman is quoted in the article talking about Harry's condition. This again is in reaction to a phone call from a journalist based on the wording that's used here. The Duke interjects. The palace does not have a systemic habit of talking about private matters. In fact, their job is quite the opposite. Well, that's not true, Harry. We know where the Wales' kids go to school. We know some intimate, well, we know some details of their lives. We know some details of the regular royals' lives. There are times when personal information is revealed because it benefits the public to know that. Mono in particular, that can hit you and last for months. And so if you are not feeling well for months and you're not in public as much, or you're looking down or looking sick, something like that, well then speculation could grow. So it's better for them to get ahead of it and say, you know what, he has mono, so that he's just a little bit sick. We're fine, it'll be fine. And it was. So why is it that hard to accept that sometimes you need to share some additional details of your story? And again, this goes back to the broken thumb. Why was it so triggering for Prince Harry and terrible for people to know that you had an injury and that you might need some well thoughts and good wishes? And I'm sure some people sent you cards about that. because people generally are nice. So Harry's argument here, again, just makes him look so incredibly foolish. He talks about this again as well. He calls it highly personal and distressing that we know this. Pressing the Duke on whether he checked with the palace before stating whether they put information about his glandular fever out freely or responding to a journalist's question appears to cause some confusion in court. Harry asserts that this was a request made by MGN to him and his lawyer specifically to check with the palace, saying, "Yes, and I believe you know that." Mr. Green moves on, but before he does, Harry adds, different spokespeople for the palace work in different ways. And also probably none of the spokespeople who were originally part of this story from 21 years ago are probably there. They probably got this question and they're like, I don't know. Maybe, sort of. I don't know. It probably was do they really know? There's only probably a handful of people who are still working at the palace that started working there that long ago. So this idea here, especially when it comes to the team that worked with Harry, they're all new. So what is he talking about here? He says that public statements are only reserved for major events. Again, not true. And insists that the Mirror article about the glandular fever was highly personal and distressing. Mr. Green asked whether he found the same article in the Edinburgh Evening News and the Sun similarly distressing. To which the Duke responds, I didn't even know there was an Edinburgh Evening News today. I didn't see the article in the Sun. So why are you railing against the Mirror for articles that are in other publications too? Other people went with the story. And so how can you say, well, the Mirror was the most distressing when all the articles and different, he would have to file so many lawsuits about all these different things. And so it's like, well, Harry, what are you doing here? And again, I think the public does have a right to know certain things. But what the public does not want to know is what Harry put in his own book. Because the person who has been most egregious when it comes to Prince Harry's own privacy is Prince Harry. He's the one who told us about his frostbitten penis and that how he put a hand cream on there of which the smell reminded him of his dead mother. And he put it on his tawdry, as he said. So what's more revealing? The story about his penis, his circumcision, all this stuff, or that he just happened to have a broken thumb and mono. The palace didn't tell us about his frostbitten penis. It was never mentioned publicly. So yeah, they did keep things private. But if you have mono, again, you could be sick for months. If you have a broken thumb, that's pretty noticeable. People want to know what happened. And is it that bad that the public has some interest in you? Sometimes, and oftentimes, it's just wanting to wish you well. And I did ask on my Twitter, what's more private, a broken thumb and glandular fever or a frostbitten penis, and whether or not he's circumcised? If it's the latter, then Harry has no right to complain. And at the time I took a screenshot of this, a broken thumb only got 2.5% of the votes, being more private information. Frostbitten penis, 97.5%. And I will have to say as well, that to a certain extent, yes, Harry has the right to reveal more about his own privacy matters. However, there are certain things that are within public concern. And there's even a bit in here, and I think I got a screenshot of it, so I'll talk about it more when I get there, but that Harry also was frustrated that his drug use came to the attention of the press and that they had really no right to dig into that. And I call absolutely complete foul and BS on that, Harry. You are funded by the taxpayers, even if you are 16. Your life, your lifestyle, your bodyguard, the home you live in, everything about your life is to a certain extent funded by the taxpayers. They have a right to know if you are a druggie. They do, because then they have a right to say, you know what, we don't want a guy who is addicted to marijuana or something. We don't want to support him publicly. That's the right of the people. So you need to either address your life or you need to get out. Those are the two options to you. And so I think that's incredibly important to make that distinction as well, because Harry's saying people don't have the right to know. BS, complete BS. People 100% have the right to know. Okay, and so also Prince Harry, of course, contradicted himself because he can't keep his story straight. So this one is regarding a meeting with Paul Burrell. So this was Diana's former butler. And he says the Duke admitted he cannot remember if he wanted to meet with Mr. Burrell when pressed by Andrew Green during cross-examination. Mr. Green repeatedly asked Harry about his feelings towards Mr. Burrell after a contradiction was pointed out to him over whether he wanted to meet him or not. There's no suggestion in Spare that you were firmly against the meeting, Mr. Green said, in contrast to an earlier report. Harry responded, no, because I wrote it when I was 38 years old, and the story I was 18. I assume I would have wanted a meeting. I'd love to give him a piece of my mind. And I was like, well, Harry, that's okay. So you're admitting that your memory is faulty and that perhaps aspects of your book were also faulty because they took artistic license. So you can't really say that it's true if it's not. And then it goes on to say, after he gets pressed once again by Mr. Green, he seems to contradict himself, saying, at the time I was firmly against the meeting. I was in the middle of the Australian outback. Hindsight is a very different thing. Can't remember whether I wanted a meeting or not. When Mr. Green pressed him for the final time, I was like, well, Harry, you brought the case, bud. You should know whether or not you wanted the meeting. This was fun. Harry says, no, I don't walk down streets, when it came to a Sunday lunchtime on Fulham Road, and he was seen walking down the street. I've seen pictures of Harry walking down the street. And I also, when I was at the Dog and Duck waiting to meet the Prince and Princess of Wales, they walked down the street to us, which surprised me a lot because they normally don't do that. So this idea that he doesn't walk down the street, complete and utter BS. And this was fun. So Harry's bringing this case, talking about how these articles were distressing to him, and then admitting he didn't really ever read them at the time. So he says, the claimant was upset at the time the articles were published, Mr. Green reads from the court documents. As a child, every single one of these articles played an important and destructive role in my growing up, Harry responded, still insisting that he may not have been aware of the specific contents of the articles. There's more than thousands, perhaps millions of articles that have been written about me since age 12. Because it's 20 years ago, I simply can't speculate about how it was. I certainly saw a lot of articles at the time. When private information that I had only shared with one or two people ends up on the front page of the newspaper, your circle of friends starts to shrink and diminish. And he also talks too about how his paranoia increased as well. Well, Harry, I hate to tell you. I know I hate to tell you. But sometimes, yes, your friends leak things to the paper. And sometimes they do it because they want money, they want attention, they want fame, they want whatever. Or perhaps they just don't like you and they threw you under the bus. I hate to say that, but that can definitely happen. So I understand that this was deeply frustrating, but his entire life, you can tell, he's basing the misery of his whole life on the press. But at some point here, you do have to take personal responsibility for your life, but he can't seem to do that. So the final thing I wanted to go over is Harry's failure to account for anything, really. He doesn't take any responsibility for anything. It's everybody else's fault. His friends, none of them would have said anything. He says specifically about Mark Dyer, oh, he wouldn't have said anything. And then Mr. Green goes, well, he gave it an interview. It says it right here. And it's like, well, I don't think he would have done that. It's like, well, do you really know the people you're talking with? And or did things get out in weird ways you didn't anticipate? So this is in regards to Chelsea Davy. So the Mirror advertised my travel plans during Mozambique holiday. Again, we covered this a little bit before, but here he said that the journalist checked into a hotel before he arrived and blagged information about his flight back from Africa. Mr. Green points out that Paul Davy, Chelsea's uncle, gave an interview to the Mail on Sunday, informing them that the Duke was about to meet her parents for the first time. That doesn't mean it's true, the Duke responds, which could apply to Harry as well. Just because you say it, Harry, doesn't mean it's true. Journalists checked into the hotel before he. Turning to Harry's witness statement, Mr. Green says that he mentions that the Mirror article states him and Chelsea had been dating 8 months by that point, which was information already in the public domain. Asked whether he believes this information was gathered unlawfully, the Duke responds that he does, particularly about his flight back on December 19th, which was included in the article. I can't imagine how they would have found out the information without flight blagging. He then accuses the Mirror journalist Jane Kerr of advertising my travel plans, saying, I'm at complete loss as to how these details were obtained. It's as distressing reading and looking at it now as it was when I first looked at it. Well, you're alive, so it wasn't that bad. And again, I think there could be a variety of reasons. It could have been somebody from Chelsea's family. It could have been a friend. It could have been a staff member. It could have been security who were frustrated at him or something. Or it could have been somebody on the plane. Somebody saw the manifest. There's so many different ways people can obtain information, especially because at this point we didn't really have cell phones and stuff. So you could call, and a lot of people, and especially in certain places, they have all these relationships, and somebody's like, hey, can you check out and see if Prince Harry is on the manifest? And like, you know what, he is, slip me, like $100 and I'll let you know. So again, Harry's complaint here is just not valid. Unless he can identify a specific moment where the Mirror on Sunday had information and were given information that only could have come from somebody else on Harry's team or whatever, there's just no way to prove that the Mirror obtained this information unlawfully. Harry has not proved that. He just proved that somebody happened to have this information, not how they obtained it. The court has moved on to the 7th article in question, the Daily Mirror article titled Harry's Cocaine, Ecstasy, and GHB Parties, written by Jane Kerr. Prince Harry said in his claim that he doesn't know where the words worried sick could have come from in relation to his father's response to his taking drugs. Well, I think Harry, again, this is logic dictating here, but if you're taking drugs, I would imagine your parent is worried sick, as you would be if Archie was taking drugs. Like, seriously, this is like no dud territory. I don't think it is my role to deconstruct the articles, Harry said when Mr. Green pressed him about this and attempted to establish whether the quote marks around worried sick in the article were intended to show a direct quotation from Charles. Pressed again by Mr. Green about the fact that information was reported elsewhere first, Harry says, when an article comes out, in my experience, journalists are under a huge amount of pressure to deliver the goods. Asked whether the journal article itself or the breaking of the story impacted him, he tells the court, the headline itself was enough to create judgment. The headline itself, let alone the article, had profound impact on me because even though I didn't read it, there were people around me that could have read it. So a couple things here. Harry has no idea what it's like in a newsroom. No freaking clue. The guy barely graduated high school, didn't go to college, so he has no idea really what a newsroom is like. In addition, he was having these massive parties. Of course, word would get out about them. And you notice particularly, he doesn't take any responsibility for himself doing drugs. He takes no responsibility for that. And he should. So there's no real excuse there for him to not take that responsibility and that awareness that, yes, I was doing drugs, I was doing something I shouldn't have been doing. He's more mad that they found out rather than he actually did it, which tells you a lot about who Prince Harry is. So this is a statement regarding Mark Dyer, who's his quote unquote second dad. It says, continuing on the Duke's complaint against the Daily Mirror article about him quitting his gap year in Australia, Mr. Green focuses on reports that he had been inside watching videos to avoid the media. Asking him whether Mark Dyer, previously described as a second dad to Harry, had revealed the TV line to the press, Harry responded, I don't accept that Mr. Dyer would have been freely speaking to the press. Well, he is plainly speaking to the press because he is appealing to Australian broadcasters to leave you alone. Mr. Green points out, the former senior aide who arranged Harry's visit was quoted as telling reporters Harry had been stuck inside to avoid the press. I see all the similarities in the stories you've shown me, again, proving the media fascination into my life, even when I'm in the middle of the Australian outback. Yes, they were interested. And again, you fueled some of this interest by being, because you say a guy who delves in drugs, that would heighten the interest in you for sure, because they're wondering how crazy you might get on the outback. So you fueled that a bit, Harry. But again, no responsibility here. And I love this one. Asked in detail about stories he alleges were illegally obtained, Harry turns to the judge and goes, it's not my role to deconstruct these articles. Justice Fancourt says it's a clear chance to agree/disagree. Mr. Green said, you've made reference in your witness statement, so I may challenge probe. Yes, they may, Harry. You're not on Oprah Winfrey anymore. You don't get a free pass. If you are making accusations, you must answer for the accusations you're making. This is not rocket science. This is not rocket science. But to Harry it is, guys. To Harry, this is a broad, huge mystery. He does not understand what's going on. He does not understand. He is deeply, deeply frustrated that people just don't bow before him. What he wants is a dictatorship in the media. That's what he wants. He wants people to write glowing articles about himself and Meghan Markle all the livelong day. And that's just not going to happen. And then finally, I love this one. So he isn't bringing any of his friends in to testify on his behalf. And he says, I would want to spare most of my friends from this experience. He told the court when asked why Guy Pelly wasn't brought in to give additional evidence. Well, I think a big part of that is Guy Pelly is not only close to Harry, but very, very close to William. I believe he is the godfather of Prince Louis. So I don't think that Guy Pelly would be all that excited to testify on Harry's behalf. And I think Harry doesn't actually have a lot of friends in the UK that he can rely on. And I think a lot of them would contradict what he says or purposely throw him under the bus because he's become such an obnoxious a-hole. I think that's what actually would happen. And again, just to account, so Harry, again, let's make this clear. Harry is doing this because he wants to help you. He wants to change the media because it's going to help you. But when he gets on the stand, don't you dare call him anything else but Prince Harry. Don't you dare call him anything else. He can't be just Harry. He has to be Prince Harry. Now, granted, he didn't require being called the Duke of Sussex, but you could tell it was a power play move to say you'd rather be called Prince Harry, that his lawyer said. And Harry's like, yes, call me Prince Harry. I'm no longer just Harry, I'm Prince Harry. And it's just that hubris and that level of disconnect between what he's actually saying and what he's pursuing and his own actions there's just a chasm as big as the Grand Canyon there. And really quick before I end, when it came to his testimony itself, Prince Harry was very much agitated at times, especially in the beginning. He seemed to calm throughout the day. But what is the point of all of this? What is Harry doing? Why is Harry going down this path? What does it all mean? And what is the purpose of this? Because we've seen this. The accusations are broad and vague. He doesn't have a good grasp of his definition of privacy. He can't seem to keep himself on track. He contradicts himself, and he also fails to account for very specific things that his family or friends or other people might have done, particularly friends and acquaintances. He doesn't seem to think any of them would compromise him in any way at all, which I just think is incredibly dense to think. So what is this really all about then? Because it doesn't seem to be about helping the public or really necessarily changing the media, because the media has already changed. And he's basically dredging up things that happened like we've seen 27 years ago at least, sometimes probably 30, and just so many different things. So what is this really about? And I think this is a statement that clenches it. This is what it's all about. It's a hatred of Piers Morgan. So Harry said in a witness statement, unfortunately, as a consequence of me bringing my Mirror Group claim, both myself and my wife have been subjected to horrific personal attacks and imitation from Piers Morgan, who was the editor of the Daily Mirror between 1995 and 2004, presumably in retaliation and in the hope that I will back down before being able to hold him properly accountable for his unlawful activity towards me and my mother during his editorialship. That's a fascinating statement, because he's claiming initially it's about him and Meghan and the terrible things Piers Morgan was saying about him and Meghan. And then he switches it to talking about Piers Morgan as the Daily Mirror editor, which was, like he said, between 1993 and 2004. A 10-year or so period that happened 20 years ago. And then against my mother and myself. So Harry, which is it? Are you getting revenge for Meghan Markle or your mother? And it's clear that his hatred and the reason he's bringing this case is because of Piers Morgan, and that Piers Morgan didn't bow at the feet of Meghan Markle. That's what this case is about. That's what this case is about. It's about nothing else but that. And that, I think, is unbelievably pathetic. What Harry's bringing up are things that happened years ago that don't happen anymore. Piers Morgan doesn't even engage in, if he did, now this is all alleged, he had claims to have no part in it, but if he did, he's not doing it now. Nobody's doing this now. They mostly just have to wait for celebrities to be stupid anymore. That's how the media runs anymore. You just wait for a celebrity to release an Imagine video, and you just take it from there. And Piers' breakdown and frustration over Meghan Markle comes from knowing her, being ghosted by her, and having a pair of eyes and a functioning brain to realize she's not a great person and she's not really a great human being, daughter, and all these sorts of things. So that's where Piers Morgan is coming from. And it doesn't have anything to do with the Daily Mirror. Harry's suing the Daily Mirror on the basis of Piers Morgan having done stuff, allegedly, 30 plus years ago, and Meghan Markle being frustrated now. That doesn't work. That doesn't work. And on the basis of that, I think Harry should lose his court case. Now, I don't know if he will. I have no clue how really the English legal system works. I still think Amber Heard should have lost her case against Johnny Depp in the UK, but she didn't. So the laws there are a little bit more complicated. He did win, though, in the United States, which I appreciated because I was always on Team Johnny. There's just the whole story Amber Heard had made zero sense to me. But all that to say is that Harry, I don't think, is serving anybody here but himself. And at the end of the day, he is the only person who's going to lose. I think Harry lost today. If you just take a look at the statements, the contradictions, that, well, that's just suspicious. Well, cops say that too, but then they go and they find evidence. You don't have evidence. You don't have a case, Harry. You have zero case. You're just bringing up baseless allegations of things that happened years ago and hoping something sticks. But unfortunately, I don't think anything is going to stick in this scenario because I think you've made the critical error of bringing a case based on your own delusions, paranoia, the tension and all the ratcheting up of pressure that has been done under Meghan Markle to you, to the point where you cannot see that this doesn't serve anyone except for your lawyers. The only ones who are going to make bank here are your lawyers, because whether you win or lose, they get money. You either have to pay them, or the Daily Mirror perhaps has to pay them, or depending on how you set it up, Harry still has to pay you. So Harry, the only person winning here is your lawyer, nobody else. And like they say, a fool and his money are soon parted. And I think we'll see Harry part with more and more of his money, as I think his cases slowly begin to fall apart. Oh, I forgot to add this one. So at the end of the trial, the judge also makes this declaration that he doesn't want them to share anything about what's going on in any of the evidence. And this was Harry's, and I had to say it because I don't like to cuss. This was his smart ass comment. He said, "Not my children, my lord. I may well be FaceTiming them." Well, do you take this seriously at all, Harry? Do you take this seriously at all, or is this a joke to you? Because this flippant statement, he did another statement too that was rather flippant, and it's like, he was asked, hey, you need to speak up, and he's like, well, I hope I don't have to speak up in anger. And it's like, why are you going to anger? Nobody's trying to make you angry. We're just trying to get to the truth. Now, granted, if you get angry because you can't defend your truth, then that's a whole separate issue. But I just found that snarky comment. There was just a lot of snark in him in there. I just don't think that plays very well. And when asked on Twitter, I forgot this as well, what you guys think about Harry winning or losing, it says, did Harry win or lose in court today? 2.8% of you said he won, and 97.2% said he lost. So guys, thank you again for participating. I appreciate it so much, and I look forward to seeing you guys again soon. Bye.